We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Aleph Amid Beis Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 51b. On the previous Amar, Rebbe Elazar said, how do we know that if somebody slaughters an animal to the Avodah Zara Markulis that he is chayiv? And Rebbe Elazar brings the pasuk of V'lo Yizbechu Od. We'll take a look at the full pasuk. The pasuk says, V'lo Yizbechu Od es zivcheim lasi'irim asher hem zonim achareim chukas olam tia zos lahem ledorosam. It talks about sacrificing, and the idea is that if you slaughter an animal to an Avodah Zara, even if that's not the normal way to serve that Avodah Zara, the person is liable. And on the previous Amar, the Gemara asked that from the pasuk of V'lo Yizbechu Od, it seems that we learn something else, as we see in the following brisa. The brisa says, Ad kan hu medaber b'kodshim shekdeshon b'shas Isra Abamos. Until here, the pasuk is speaking about kodshim which were sanctified, consecrated at the time when it's usher to bring a korban on a bama, which is a mizbeach outside of the Beis HaMikdash, v'yikrivon b'shas Isra Abamos, and the person actually offered it at the time when it's usher to bring it on the bama. Sharei onshan amar, because there the pasuk is stated, Shenemar, it says, Ve'el Pesach Oel Moed Lo Heviu. It says the person didn't bring it to the entrance of the Oel Moed. So Onesh Shamani, so we know there's a punishment. Shamana, we know there's a punishment for somebody who offers it on a bama, who offers the carbon on a bama. Azhara Minayin, where do we know a warning from? Talmud Lomar, Pentala Olosecha. That's from the pasuk of Pentala Olosecha. Uchid Rabbi Avin Amar Rabbi Law. It's like Rabbi Avin Amar Rabbi Law. To Amar Rabbi Avin Amar Rabbi Law, because Rabbi Avin says, Rabbi Law says, Kol Mokum Shenemar, anytime it says, Hishomer Pen Vi'al, if it uses the word Hishomer Pen or Al, and it says over here, Pentala Olosecha. So if it uses any of those words, Eino Ela Below Saseh. So that's talking a lo saseh, that's a negative commandment. And Rashi explains the first part of the brisa, Ad kan hay v'lo yizbechu. This pasuk of v'lo yizbechu, which we just saw, beparsha shchutei chutz ksiv. It's written in the context of the parsha of shchutei chutz, when you slaughter a korban outside of the Beis Hamikdash. V'ad pasuk zeh ha'inyan medaber bekodshim shekdesham b'shas Isra Abamos. Until this point in the pasuk is talking about karbonos, which you consecrated, you sanctified at the time that you're not allowed to bring on a bama. Li'achar shehukam ha'mishkan, after the mishkan was put up. V'yikrivon b'shas Isra Abamos, and the person actually brought the carbon on a bum at the time when that's prohibited. Sharei onshan amar, because the punishment is stated, Shagila lacha inyan es onshan shein b'kares. The pasuk says that the punishment is kares. And again, the brisa then brought not only the punishment pasuk, but also the pasuk that is a warning. And the brisa continues, Mikan va'elach, from here forward, and Rashi explains, Mikan va'elach hay v'lo yizbechu od, meaning from the pasuk of v'lo yizbechu od and onward, hu medaber b'kodshim shekdeshon b'shas heter abamos. That's talking about when the person consecrated the carbon at the time when it actually was mutter to bring the carbon on a bama, v'yikrivon b'shas isra abamos, but then he brought the carbon at the time that it's prohibited to bring it on a bama. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk, Laman asher yaviu b'nei Yisrael zivcheim asher hem zovchim. It says they're going to bring the sacrifices shehitarti loch kavar. We're talking here about those that were permitted. And the pasuk then says, Al Penei Hasada, on the field, Milame, this teaches Shekol HaZoveach Bebama, that anybody who sacrifices on a bama, on an altar outside of the Beis HaMikdash, outside of the Mishkan, B'shas Isra HaBamos, at a time when it's prohibited to use bamos, Mala Olav HaKosav, the pasuk considers it, Ki'ilu Hu Zoveach Al Penei Hasada, as if he's being Zoveach Al Penei Hasada on the field. And the brisa continues, V'haviyum la'Hashem, when the pasuk says V'haviyum la'Hashem, Zu mitzvahs hasei, that's a positive commandment. U'mitzvahs lo hasei minayin, where do we see the negative commandment? Talmud lomar, the pasuk says V'lo yizbechu od es zivchayim. That's the pasuk of V'lo yizbechu od. Yachol ye'onish kares, I might think there's a punishment of kares for this. Talmud lomar, the pasuk says Chukas olam tia zos lahem. Zos lahem, this is for them. V'lo acheres lahem, and nothing else, meaning to say it's a negative commandment, but there is no kares. And before we take a look at Rashi, we'll take a look at the full pasuk that the brisa was just discussing. L'man asher yaviu b'nei Yisrael zivcheim asher hem zovchem al pnei hasada v'havium la'Hashem al pesach ol moed el hakohen v'zovchu zivchei shlamim la'Hashem osam. That pasuk is two psukim right before this pasuk of v'lo yizbechu od. And Rashi explains, B'shas heter, again, that part of the pasuk is talking at a time when it actually was mutter to bring bamos, so that's when you consecrated the animal. Kodem shukam hamishkan, that's before the mishkan was put up. V'hizar akasav, and the pasuk is warning. Sha'aval pi shahayu mukdoshin l'shem hakrav as bama, even though when the animal was sanctified, the understanding was it would be brought on a bama. Lo yakrivim od ba'bama legavoa. Still, since now it's a time when you're not supposed to use a bama, you cannot bring these animals on the bama. Ta'akadosh baruch hu shenemar, as it says, as zivcheihem zvachim ha'omdim. We learn from Esevchayim those karbanos that are ready to go, kodem l'chein, that were consecrated before that. Shehitarti bebama legavoa, that at that time they were permitted to be on a bama. B'shas isra bamos, but once the time of the prohibition of bamos comes, kizovech al pnei hasada la'avodas kochavim, it's like sacrificing on the field, which is a way of saying it's as if you're sacrificing to Avoda Zara. And Rashi continues, the Brisa then said, Zu mitzvah saseh, this is a positive commandment, meaning to say, Ko'elu shehuktashu kodem hakamas hamishkan, those that were sanctified before the Mishkan was put up, v'ikrivan achrei chein ba'bama, but then they're offered after the Mishkan was put up on a bama, she'over ba'aseh, the point of the Brisa is that there's a transgression then of a positive commandment. And then the Brisa said, Yachol yehei onish kares, one might think that there would even be a punishment of kares in this case, Ki'ilu hikdeshon, b'shas isr, as if the person had even sanctified it at the time of the Isra Habamos, v'ikrivan, and offered it. To Anush ben Kares La'el, there we say the punishment is Kares, and so you might have thought that's true also in a situation where the person consecrated it at the time that Bamos were permitted, but then offered it on a Bama at the time that the Bamos were prohibited, but that is not the case. There's no Kares in that second situation. And the Brisa then continued, the way that we know that there's no kares is zos lahem, it says this is for them, meaning aseh velos aseh. There's an aseh and a los aseh, ve'in acheres lem, but nothing else for them, kares, meaning there's no kares. And the whole point of bringing all this, alma, we see, la'azharas shochte chutz kodshim shehuktashu b'shas heter abamos, also, we see that this part of the pasuk is a warning for those who slaughter animals outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Let's say it was consecrated during the time of heter abamos, but then they offered it at a time of Isra abamos. That's really what the pasuk is being brought for. V'yazharas markulis minolan, and therefore where are we going to get the warning by markulis, meaning if a person would slaughter an animal to markulis, now we can't use that pasuk of v'lo yizbechu od for that, because again we're using it for the specific situation with regards to the bama. And the Gemara continues and answers the question. Amar Rava says, Kari bei v'lo yizbechu, the Kari bei v'lo od. You can read the pasuk as having two warnings. One part of the pasuk is saying v'lo yizbechu, and the other part is saying v'lo od. And Rashi explains, Kari bei v'lo yizbechu, v'kari bei v'lo od, v'hai od lo itzrich, the v'lo od is not needed. So therefore, shadi azhara atarvayu v'techosh ve'trei lave. You can say that the warning is going on both, and you're going to consider it to be two lavin, meaning to say you have two separate lavin over here. One is the idea of the warning in terms of offering on the bama, and the other is the warning in terms of slaughtering to Avoda Zara. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Matzah berosho ma'os ksus okelim, if a person finds that the head of the Avoda Zara, money or garments or vessels, harei elum mutarin, these are mutter, these are permitted. Parchile anavim, if a person finds branches of clusters of grapes, v'ataros shel shibolim, or wreaths of stalks, v'yenos, or shmanim, v'siltos, or wine, oil, or flour, v'chol davar shechayotze bo karev al gabe hamizbeach, anything that a similar thing would be brought on the mizbeach, asers, and then those items are prohibited. And Rashi explains, Matzah berosho shel markulis, if he finds by the head of the markulis statue, mos, ksos v'kelim, money, garments, or vessels, mutarin, those are permitted. She'enan shel noi, because those are not decorative items, kedim mefarish beGemara, as the Gemara will explain. And the Gemara says, Minohani Mili, from where do we know the halach in the Mishnah? Am Reb Chia bar Yosef, Am Reb Oshia. Reb Chia bar Yosef says that Reb Oshia says, Kasav Echad Omer, one pasuk says, Vatiru es shikutzeihem eveskiluleihem, eitz vo'even kesev v'zav asher imohem. In this pasuk it mentions the wood and the stone and the silver and the gold, and it uses the term asher imohem, that is with them. V'chasav Echad Omer, and there's another pasuk that says, Lo sachmod kesef v'zav aleim, it says, don't desire the kesef v'zav, it only mentions silver and gold, and it doesn't use the word imohem, he uses the word aleim upon them. And how do we resolve these psukim? Haketzad, how so? Imohem dum yad aleim, it means to say with them, similar to what is upon them. We'll see Rashi in a moment. Ma'aleim davar shal noi aser, just like things that are upon them, if it's something decorative, it's prohibited. She'eno shal noi mutter, but if it's not decorative, it's permitted. Af imohem, so too things that are with them. Davar shal noi aser, if it's something that's decorative, it is prohibited. She'eno shal noi mutter, but if it's something that's not decorative, then it is permitted. And Rashi explains, Eitz v'even kesef v'zav asher imohem, mashma, the pasuk implies, shahayu makrivin eitz v'even v'chesef v'zav, that they were offering to the Avodah Zara wood and stone and silver and gold. V'kari like cross shikutzim, and the pasuk refers to that as shikutzim. It says vatiru es shikutzeihem. Alma kol mad makrivin. You see that anything or everything that is offered kamei in front of the Avodah Zara, mitzar is prohibited. V'chasav echad omer lo sachmod kesef v'zav aleim. And the other pasuk says kesef and zav. Aval eitz v'even lo. It doesn't say wood and stone. And so how do we resolve the psukim? Haketzad, how so? Imoyen dum yada alein. with them, similar to upon them. Ma'alein davar shel noi asur, just like alein, it means something that's decorative. And Rashi explains, Taha kesef v'zavu, because again, by the pasuk of aleim, what did it say? It said the things that are aleim are kesef and zav, those are things that are decorative. Afimoin, so too with them, techsev eitz va'even, where it talks about wood and stone, im shel noihu asur, if it's something that's decorative, it's prohibited, v'im lav mutter, and if not, it's mutter. So right now, the Gemara is simply saying that the eitz va'even must be similar to the kesef and the zav. They have to be decorative. And Rashi notes, ulekamon parach. Now later on, the Gemara is going to ask, hamos davar shel noyu, but money is something that is decorative. Meaning, we're trying to explain here the halach in the Mishnah. And the first halach in the Mishnah is that if we find by the head of the Avodah Zara money, ksus, v'kelim, you find money, garments, or vessels, then they're mutter. But most are something decorative, and the whole point of the Gemara here seems to be saying that something that is decorative is going to be prohibited, is not going to be mutter. And the Gemara continues and asks, V'yema aleim dumya di'imoim, but why don't we just say the reverse? Whatever is upon the Avodah Zara should be similar to what is with the Avodah Zara. Ma imoim, just like in the pasuk of imoim, kol masha imoim, anything, it's listing everything that's with them, eitz, v'even, kesev, and zav. Af aleim, kol shaleim, so too maybe anything that's upon the Avodah Zara would be prohibited. But the Gemara says, no, imkain, if so, lo yomer aleim, then it wouldn't need to say aleim at all. And Rashi explains, Kol she'imoim, anything that's with them, dehaksiv nami eitz va'even. Again, in the pasuk of imoim, it talks about wood and stone. Ustam eitz va'even lav denoinenu. In general, we would assume that wood and stone are not decorative. And the Gemara explains, Imkein lo yomar aleim. If that was the case, it never even needs to say aleim. Meaning, Kulei kra lo itzrach, you wouldn't need that entire pasuk of aleim. Dehashta, because if now we're saying masha imoin, that which is with them, what does it mean with them? De'eno olav mamish, that it's actually not on the Avodah Zara, it's just next to the Avodah Zara. Ashminan kra de shikutzim ninu, the pasuk is saying that all of that is considered to be shikutzim. Va'asiri, and it's prohibited. Sha'alein mi boilach, do we need to say anything about alein? In other words, you wouldn't need the pasuk at all if we already said that anything that's with the Avodah Zara, eitz, v'evan, kesev, v'zav, is prohibited. So obviously, if they're upon the Avodah Zara, they would be prohibited. So why are we bringing the second pasuk of lo sachmon kesev v'zav aleim? The reason is to say that aleim dumya, that imoim is dumya di aleim. Just like by aleim we're talking about something decorative, so too if it's something that's next to them, something that's imoim, it has to be something that is decorative in order to be asur. And the Gemara continues and asks, and this is the question that Rashi just mentioned above, mos, if there's money, so davar shel noyu, that is something that is decorative. What does it mean? That matzah barosha mos, they're mutar and they're permitted, that's something that's decorative. We just said that something decorative is prohibited. And the Gemara answers, Amri devei Rabbi Yanai, they say in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yanai, bekis kosher v'talei lo b'tzavar, we're talking about where it is in a pouch and it's tied to the neck, so it's not in a decorative fashion. And the Gemara asks, Ksus, what about a garment, davar shel noyu? Isn't that something decorative? Amri devei Rabbi Yanai, they say in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yanai, b'chsus mekufeles, we're talking about where the garment is folded, umunachas lo arosh, and it's placed by its head. And kli, what about a vessel, davar shel noyu? That's also something decorative. Amar Papa says, the sechifa le mashchilta areshe, where a pot is placed upside down on the head of the idol, and that obviously is not decorative. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravasi Bar Chia, Ravasi Bar Chia says, Kolshu lifnim men hakilkalin, anything that's within the kilkalin, we'll see Rashi in a moment, afilu mayim v'melachas, or even if it's water and salt, it is prohibited. And chutz lekilkalin, if it's outside of the kilkalin, so then it depends, davar shel noi asur, if it's something decorative, it's asur, she'eno shel noi mutter, if it's something that's not decorative, then it is mutter, then it is permitted. Rashi explains, kilkalin is mechitza hi prusa lifnei avodas kochavim, they would have a mechitza, it was like a curtain that was spread in front of the Avodah Zara. The kilkalin hu kinoi shel koloim. Kilkalin is just a nickname that they're using for these koloim, for these curtains. Afilu mayim v'melach, even the water and the salt, de lo lanoihu. Water and salt is not decorative. Kevan dechein pnim ninu, but since it is something that they would offer in the Beis HaMikdash, so have it tikroves, that's considered an offering. But chutz lekilkalin, if it's outside of the curtain, so lav mishum tikroves isay, so that's not an issue anymore of tikroves, it's not an offering, and so then it depends, again, if it's something that is decorative, it's asur. If it's something that's not decorative, then it's mutter. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says, Naktinon ein kilkalin, we hold that there is no concept of kilkalin, lo le'peor v'lo le'markulis, not for the Avodah Zara peor, and not for the Avodah Zara of markulis. And the Gemara says, Lamai, what exactly are we talking about? Ilema da'afilu panim kechutz dami, if you're going to say that even inside is treated like outside, vishari, and it would be permitted, meaning to say, if we're saying over here a leniency, we're saying there's no halach of kilkalin for peor and markulis, and therefore again, we said before, kol shehu lifnim min hakilkelin, afilu mayim v'melach aser, but maybe we'll say that doesn't apply to peor and markulis. If you'd have water and salt within the curtain, it would be permitted, but that doesn't make sense. Hashta piure mefarin kameh, if by bal peor, we would defecate in front of it, that's the way it's served. Mayim v'melach lo mekarvin, you think you're not going to offer water and salt to the peor. Ela afilu chutz kivifnim dami v'yaser, what it really means when we say there's no curtain, there's no halach of curtain when it comes to peor and markulis, what we mean is even outside is like inside, meaning even if you'd be outside of the curtain, these items would still be prohibited. And Rashi explains, Hilkach shel no yaser, again this is referring to outside of the kilkelin by regular Avoda Zara. If it's decorative, it's aser. The nafka me asher imoin, that's learned from asher imoin. She'eno shel no mutter, but if it's not decorative, then it's mutter. Ve'afilu hu ke'ein panim, even if it's something that would be offered inside the mikdash, to chutz l'kilkelin lo manchi tekrovis, because outside of the curtain, you're not going to bring an offering to the Avoda Zara. That's why if it's eno shel noi, it will be mutter. Ein kilkelin, and so then we said there's no idea of kilkelin, no concept of kilkelin by peor and markulis. Ein Torah's kilkelin lo lepeor v'lo lemarkulis. Again, there's no law of kilkelin for peor and markulis. Lemai hilchasa ein lo kilkelin. What do we mean for what practical halachic matters? There no kilkelin. Inema de lo mitzar davar she'ein shel noi lifnim mi kilkelin. If you're going to say that it's a leniency, that something that's not decorative within the curtain, lifnim mi kilkelin is not going to be aser. Lifnim mi kilkelin didei keshar avodas kochavim. Even though by other avodas kochavim that is aser, but that's not true over here. But hashta piure mefarin kamei matris and lefanav. Again, we said you defecate in front of the peor, and so then the Gemara ultimately said afilu chutz kipnim dami umitzar. It's a stringency. It means even outside of the curtain, it's considered like within the curtain, and these items like mayim v'melach would be aser even outside. Sharei kol avodaso derech bizayin, because the whole way you serve it is a disgraceful way. The kilkelin have tznius, and the kilkelin is something that is made for privacy and modesty. Well, the chavod, it's for honor. Hilkach lo shaychi be. Therefore, there's no concept of kilkelin by something which you serve it in a disgraceful manner. V'lo mifsegi. Therefore, it's not considered to be a hefsek. It's not considered to be a separation. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah: Avodas kochavim shahaya la gina o merchatz. If an Avoda Zara has a garden or a bathhouse, nenin mehen shalo betova, you are allowed to benefit from them, meaning from the garden or the bathhouse. Shalo betova. That means if you don't pay. Ve'ein nenin mehen betova, but you are not allowed to get benefit betova, meaning to say you're not allowed to get benefit if you are going to pay. And the Mishnah continues, Haya shalav v'shal acherim, if the gina or merchatz belong to the Avoda Zara and to others, then nenin mehen betova v'shalo betova, then you can get benefit betova or shalo betova, whether you pay or not. And the Mishnah continues, Avodas kochavim shalovad kochavim, an idol that belongs to an ovad kochavim, it belongs to an idolater, a non-Jew, asura miyad, that is forbidden immediately. V'shal Yisrael, but if it belongs to a Jew, ein asura ad shetayavid, it's only asur when it starts to be worshipped. And the Gemara says, Amar Abaya, Abaya says, Betova. What does it mean, Betova? It means Betovas Komer. It means that you're paying the priest. It's problematic if you're going to pay the priest. Shalo Betova. And what does it mean, Shalo Betova? Shalo Betovas Komer. And that means that you're not paying anything to the priest. And so again, if you have this Avodah Zara that has a garden or a merchatz, it's okay if you don't pay the priest, but it's problematic if you pay the priest. Lafuke Tovas Ovdeh Deshari. In this explanation, it's to exclude, let's say you pay those who worship, that actually is permitted. The whole issue over here is only that you cannot pay the priests of the Avodah Zara. And the Gemara continues, Ika demasni la sefer. There are some that learn what we just said above. They learn it on the end of the Mishnah. The end of the Mishnah said, Haya shalah vishal acherim. If the gina or merchatz belong to the Avodah Zara, but also belong to others, then it said, Nen in mehen betova vishalo betova. It said you're allowed to benefit betova or shalo betova. It doesn't matter if you pay. And on that, Amar Abaya, Abaya said, betova. What does it mean, betova? Betova sacherim. It means betova sacherim. It means that you're going to pay others. And shalo betova means shalo betovas komer. And shalo betova means that you're not going to pay the priests. And the Gemara says, Man demasni asefa. Now, the one who learns Abaya's statement on the end of the Mishnah, kol shekain aresha, that certainly would be true on the beginning of the Mishnah. Uman demasni aresha, but if you learn Abaya's statement on the beginning of the Mishnah, meaning to say that in the beginning of the Mishnah, Abaya said you're not allowed to pay the priests, avol asefa, but then you would say that on the end of the Mishnah, kevan deika acherim bahada, since there are others who also own the bathhouse or the garden, afila betovas komrin nami shaber dami, it actually would be okay if you pay the priest. And Rashi explains, Nanin mimena shalo betova, you can get benefit from it, from the bathhouse or from the garden, shalo betova. It means shalo yalu schar lakomrim. Again, you can't pay any money to the priests. Dein hektish la'avodas kochavim. There's no concept of hektish of consecration by Avodah Zara. Keda amron b'perek kol hatzlamim, that we said in perek kol hatzlamim earlier. Ovdeh, and then the Gemara said in terms of paying those who worship the Avodah Zara, ovdeh kochavim ha'ovdin osa, the idolaters who worship the Avodah Zara, lo ichbes lan, we don't care. Yavinan luhu schar tovas hanapurs, if you pay them a little bit. And then the Gemara said, Kol shekein ha-reish, if you're going to learn the statement on the Seifa, then certainly that's true on the Reish at the beginning of the Mishnah, meaning to say, Tekevan dekula da avodas kochavim, if you're going to say that if it's partially owned by the Avodah Zara, it's a problem to pay the priests, so certainly in the Reish where it's entirely owned by the Avodah Zara, aser lasei schar, it would be forbidden to pay any money to the priests. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. The Mishnah said, Avodas kochavim shel ovid kochavim asura miyad, an Avodah Zara that belongs to an ovid kochavim, it belongs to an idolater, is asur immediately, it's forbidden immediately. And the Gemara says, Masnis and Mani, who's the author of our Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva? The author of our Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva. Titania, as we learned in a Braisa, Abei ta'abdun eskolam mekomos asher avdu sham hagoyim. It says you have to destroy all of the places where the goyim worshipped, where the nations worshipped. Bekelim shenishtamshu bohen la'avodas kochavim hakasim medaber. The pasuk is talking about vessels that they were used for Avodah Zara. Rashi explains, "Bekalim shenishtamshu bohen la'avodas kochav makas medaber u'lekamon parach." Now later on, the Gemara is going to ask on this. Hamakomos ksiv. It says over here locations. It says in the pasuk makomos, places. So what exactly do we mean to say that we're talking about kalim shenishtamshu bohen la'avodas kochavim? In any case, the Brisa continues, Yachol asom v'lo gomram. One might think that if he makes them but he doesn't finish them, Gomrum v'lo heviyam, he finishes them but he doesn't bring them, Heviyam v'lo nishtamshu b'hen, he brings them but he doesn't use them, Yachol yihu asurim, one might think that they are forbidden. Talmud lomar asher avdu sham hagoyim, the pasuk says that the nations have to serve there, meaning she'ein asur, and these things don't become prohibited ad sheyavdu, until they're actually worshipped. Mikan amru, from here they say avodas kochavim shel ovid kochavim, if it's an avodah zara that belongs to an ovid kochavim, eino asura ad shetayavid, it's only forbidden when it's actually worshipped. V'shal Yisrael, but if it belongs to a Jew, asura miyad, it's asur immediately. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael, these are the words of Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva says chilaf hadvarim, exactly the opposite. Avodas kochavim shel ovid kochavim, if the avodah zara belongs to an ovid kochavim asura miyad, then it's asur right away. V'shal Yisrael, but if it belongs to a Jew, ad shetayavid, until it is worshipped. And so again, the whole point over here is that our Mishnah seems to be following the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said, Bekalim shenishtamshu behen la'avodas kochavim hakasim medaber. The pasuk is talking about vessels that were used for Avodah Zara. And the Gemara asks, like Rashi mentioned, hamakomos ksiv, but it says locations in this pasuk. What do you mean it's talking about the vessels that are used for Avodah Zara? And the Gemara says, Imeino inyan lemekomos de lo mitzri. So if you can't apply the pasuk to places, because places actually are not forbidden. We learned that earlier. T'chsiv, as it's written, Elohayim al haharim. The idols, the gods, are on the mountains. V'lo haharim Elohayim, but the mountains don't have the status of being gods. They don't have the status of being idols, so it can't be referring to the makomos. And Rashi explains, Es Elohayim bahu kroksiv. Those words are written in the pasuk. That's why we're darshaning the pasuk in that fashion. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Beis Amud Aleph.